welcome to this chat with various people involved with Sopwith, and this is for the 40th anniversary celebrations of Sopwith. So on the panel here we have, well, maybe you'd like to go around and introduce yourselves. So I'll start. I'm Simon Howard. I'm the maintainer of the SDL Sopwith source port, which is based on the original Sopwith source code. There are comments there dating all the way back to the 1980s, which I'm quite proud of. And yeah, so David, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay. Well, yes. Hi, Dave Clark. I'm the original author of Sopwith, with I have to say with some assistance from Jack and David here, yeah, and a couple of versions, and also I still like to maintain the source code a bit. I don't know if I'll ever put out another version or not, but yeah.
I'm Jack Cole. I was part of the team at B&B, and my area of work was the Imaginet network. And when we started doing that, the company had an idea, but we had no network software to follow as a guideline. We were figuring it out as we went along and making it all work. So part of what Imaginet did was obviously allow to communicate with each other, and it would be good to have a way to demo that effect, and that's where software came in. So Dave stepped up and made it all work.
I'm Dave Growden, and I also worked at B&B, and we did, and other places together before that. And I basically tested the stuff that they wrote. So, yeah, that's what we did.
Dave has made another maybe a contribution that you didn't necessarily want to make, but the oxen in Sopwith are. Dave had the nickname of Ox, and therefore those are not cows out there; those are oxen. In Dave's honor for all the testing that he did.
And I'm Josh Horowitz. I'm a game player of Sopwith, and back in the day, I remember playing it on an old IBM XT. I ended up playing it for years to come. And by the time I got into university in the mid-90s, I decided to put up a section of Sopwith on my homepage. And eventually that became what is known as Sopwith.org, which is the repository of all things Sopwith, and still remains even today. And I was able to get in touch with people in the greater community who eventually revisited the source code, their version actually happen. And that's really it. Glad to be here with the bunch.
I'm glad to see that the website is still going after 20 years, helping to keep the interest in the game alive. Yeah, I guess I'll start off by saying, did any of you expect that after 40 years you'd still be here talking about Sopwith? when you wrote that game to start off with, like, did you ever think 40 years from now we're going to be talking about this game? Because I bet
no. I can remember when I can't remember the date, but when I first realized that this thing was still alive out there on the net. I mean, we basically, forgotten. I mean, in my case, forgotten about it. I mean, we'd done the work. Jack had done Imaginet, and we'd done this, and we'd moved on. Or at least I'd moved on when I was doing other work, and for some reason, I don't know if I looked up the word Sopwith or whatever, or if I, like anybody, has got a little bit of an ego. They always Google their own name to see what comes up, and it's like, whoa. And then we saw these sites out there, and it was really an incredible moment, actually, to see that this had actually, and I hadn't even realized that it essentially was leaked, right? It was not released for distribution on the net.
Right.
It somehow made it out, and so it was a great surprise.
Well, yeah, I think it had escaped long before then, because when I was doing some research, I stumbled across even magazines that were offering it for sale. You could, like, this is back in the 80s, you could apparently call someone up over the phone and with a credit card and like order a copy of Sopwith along with some other things on floppy disk. So I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but people were playing this long before it appeared on the internet.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we made some money for somebody with it.
Think of all the royalties.
The royalties, yeah.
I'm not sure how many of the Imaginet customers out there were all that happy with their employees playing Sopwith all the time.
Oh yeah.
Because that was a hazard. It was very addictive, as we all knew. Yeah, Dave really knows. Dave was a very good Sopwith player. A very, very good Sopwith player.
It's the only action game I have ever played pretty much on the computer. My son is a gamer, and he came up to me when he was young and he said, "Dad, have you ever heard of a game called Sopwith?" Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's been around.
Well, when we were actually doing the development of Imaginet and Sopwith and all the other little software pieces, the way we were sitting, if you can sort of imagine, is Dave and I were sitting face to face. Their desks were, back onto each other, and then Jack was over on the other side of Dave, and Dave is he's a big guy. He's very big, but he's very nimble. Don't go out on the squash court because you're going to get hammered. He's got the movements of a ballet dancer, but he's a big guy. And anyways, when he would play Sopwith, it was funny because he would get so into it. He'd be pulling the plane up and he'd be leaning back and he'd be leaning side. You'd think it was a 3D realistic animation body was moving.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, those were fun times. There were about half a dozen or 8 of us developers, all in basically a warehouse, a small warehouse, and so we all had our own little cubicles, but only protected on one side. So yes, we saw right through the whole length, and we were working on actually a lot of interesting things. There was Imaginet, there was a database system called the Manager, there was the mail stuff that Dave was doing. We had some hardware guys in there that were doing hardware designs. So it was a real good incubator type spot. I had a lot of fun developing things as well as playing Sopwith.
Who were your customers primarily for all that Imaginet and Manager stuff?
So as your history mentions, B&B owned a bunch of retail outlets. And so if they were selling to a office with, 10 computers, they would sell them an Imaginet as a networking solution. But we had some pretty interesting customers as well. We had an installation at the Vatican for a while, a library at the Vatican. We had a college out in Alberta that had a multi-tiered Imaginet system. There's a food company in Canada called Weston's, which is probably the biggest food company in Canada. Their head office, which is a big tower in Toronto, was all Imaginet wired with hundreds of stations on their Imaginet. Yes. So, yeah. So we had a lot of customers.
Prison.
Archambault. Yeah. Okay. I had forgotten that one, Dave.
Well, they sent Jamie there with soap on a rope.
Very good. Yes. So anyway, it was a fun environment. We had a lot of good times developing stuff. Things like Sopwith came along, and one of our developers, he sort of made it his mission to re-implement the Unix utilities to run under DOS. So we actually had a whole suite of Unix tools that we used as developers. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used the editor for years after that. It was probably the best editor. I liked that for 2 decades.
Yeah, good tools. Might as well stick around and use it. Yeah.
And do you remember Goobed?
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah, that was debug spelled backwards. I wrote a debugger so we could not only debug programs but also analyze disk format. That was I used that for a good long while after leaving B&B.
Mm-hmm. We basically had the Norton utilities before Norton did, but
yes, yeah.
The management didn't want to market them, so we never got them out there. But
yeah, it could have been you on the cover with the pink shirt, right? Like,
could have been, because in order to do Imaginet, we had to get deep down into the internals of disk structures and things like that. So, so we knew a lot about it and put it into tools. It was fun.
Yeah, I recently put together something called Imaginet, which is kind of emulating the bare minimum that lets you play Sopwith, like the original 4-player the 4-player games, and you can play it over the internet now if you're running in DOSBox. So I can totally relate to that low-level disk stuff, because a couple of months ago I was digging through that code myself.
Oh, that is cool. I would actually love to take a look at if you finally got the synchronization to work properly.
Yeah, I think I have, but there are probably some bugs in there.
Yeah, Simon, when you've got something, give it to me. If you don't mind, I mean, I'll put it up on the site.
Yeah.
That's how people will find it.
Yeah. Okay, so I have another question for the panel. Is it strange that BMB? I did a Google search for BMB CompuScience, and pretty much all of the search results are Sopwith related. Is that strange that the company is now primarily remembered for Sopwith?
I'll jump in on that. I don't think it's strange. Obviously, when the retail arm closed, they vanished. The company published a magazine called The Transactor, which was for Commodore 64 users. Well, that market kind of diminished. Imaginet was eclipsed of networks with a lot more behind them, like Novell and IBM. And the Manager, which was a really great database project, which was nicely integrated with Imaginet as well. The database products came along. So the BMB just didn't have the resources to keep bringing those products forward. We produced them, they were great, but versions 2, 3, 4, 5 to infinity couldn't happen, and just too much competition by big players. So it was unfortunate, but BMB kind of just wasn't able to keep up.
And a lot of what was written was sort of behind the scenes, right? You don't talk about your network. You have a network and you use it. It's not like a flashy red sports car out in front of your house. It's the pickup in the back that you use to haul stuff around. So yeah, you don't talk about that as much.
But just for context, this is like cutting edge. This was 1980s, early to mid 1980s, far before the internet and anything that today's audience.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Imaginet was one of the very first networks for that level of machine, if not among the first 2 or 3 that were available. So we were inventing the technology basically, both on the software and the hardware side. But you can't reinvent it every year the way an IBM could do, right? So we put what we had out there, and we made a revision of Imaginet hardware, and it was successful for the size of the company that we were at the time, but it just wasn't enough momentum.
Mm-hmm.
There's another piece of the networking side of the software on it that it was fun to work on. It never really, Jack, I think you were saying earlier to me that it never made it to production, but we had a product called RemDOS, which was remote DOS, and because we had multiple clients working against a server, sharing a disk was an issue, and quite often programs weren't written to share disks at that point in time. So we realized that what we had to do was we had to utilize the DOS installation on the server, and the clients would actually make the DOS requests to the server, as opposed to actually doing the low-level disk activities. So we actually built a layer on top of Imaginet, which intercepted the DOS requests and sent them over to the server and executed on the server and the results back to the client. And it worked relatively well, but we just couldn't keep up with the newer versions of DOS and funny thing called Windows that was coming out. Yeah, we just couldn't keep up with that.
Yeah, the original came with a blue TechRef manual. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I donated my copy to the Computer Museum at the University of Waterloo, but the TechRef manual published the BIOS listings, assembly or BIOS listings in the back.
Yeah, all
They
the
were
source.
wonderful. Yeah. And that let you on the secrets of the first versions of DOS. So we knew which vectors to trap and we knew what to do with them. But as newer versions of DOS and as Dave said, Windows came out, we didn't get source code for those. So limited in what we could do. But the first TechRef manual was wonderful. I spent many hours going through that assembler code.
Yeah, as we all did.
Yeah.
The audience for computers began to change. I mean, back then it was almost like hobbyists and people who really wanted to look at the innards. So it made sense they had huge manuals. But
Yeah. Unless you were Apple.
But
yeah,
any PC at that time was $5,000 in 1980s dollars. That's a lot of coin.
Mm-hmm.
My laptop was $1,200 from Costco. I mean, how do you compare?
Yeah.
And that was, since we're getting into the history of all this stuff, the Atari 20 ST came out a few years after the original Imaginet, and it was more of a consumer product. I don't remember what the cost of that was. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was certainly much less than a PC. And so we journal box to let those hook up to an existing Imaginet because the file structures were all the same and the interrupts to get at them were all the same. The smart Atari had just cloned a bunch of IBM stuff. And so for a while, we could mix IBM PCs and Atari 520s and 1040s on the same Imaginet. We ported the software, the manager, which did sector locking or record locking over Imaginet so that you could have multiple people updating databases. And you could run both of those platforms. So that was a nice, viable alternative. But the 520 wasn't all that successful either, unfortunately.
were you able to port Sopwith to the Atari?
We did it. Yes, we. Alan Lewis built a board, right? That we put a ROM on it, and we programmed that, and that was a very interesting project in that really limited the size of Sopwith because we had to fit it on that. I think it was a 64K ROM that we were playing with, and
Quite likely.
and we had the OS on there. So Sopwith, if I recall correctly, was 46K in size, and it's so that was a challenge to keep it down to that size and still have the functionality it had.
I guess that's one of the big what ifs, of course. If Sopwith had actually found a threshold within the Atari platform and it got known and actually published as its own thing, it stayed in the PC world.
Yeah.
This
been cool.
This brings me to a question that I had because there's a whole bunch of Atari related code in the published Sopwith source code. And I was wondering, how complete was that port? Was it ever completed? Was there ever a version of Sopwith for Atari?
It did run. It's interesting that you say that there's you're bringing back some memories here. I'd forgotten that could be a piece of the code that had to be written for it. But yes, no. As I recall, it ran. I have lost it. I don't know where I lost it, but I did actually have the board. You plugged it into the socket on the Atari, and we made up a cardboard cover for it to make it look somewhat official.
So it was a cartridge then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it was just the card at that point.
Yeah.
It didn't have any cover on it or anything. But somewhere it's along the ways of my mini moves it has disappeared, unfortunately.
Cool. You would have probably had to redo all the video stuff for the.
Okay. Now you've got me. I'm going to have to. I still have the diskettes somewhere. If I find the machine that can read diskettes,
I have one.
I still have all of the code. I probably shouldn't do, and if we can suck that code off. But you're saying the published code has it in it, so
it does. Yeah,
it has the Atari code.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at that. Yeah.
That's a good goal for the 50th anniversary, Dave.
Yeah.
That would be something. Yeah, to bring that back and see what it would look like through emulation.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I did do some work it's been a little side project of mine, but some work I've done since has been based on doing 3D astronomical simulation. And I actually put together a 3D version of the Sopwith plane with the same number of great huge cubic pixels. But so it's this chunky airplane going around, but in 3D, and it looks kind of cool.
Send us screenshots. I want to update the site.
I think we would all love to see that if you could share some screenshots.
Yeah,
or
my
maybe...
my dream was to, and I just never got around to it. Maybe I'll give it a try. This is a pre-release here, but I always wanted to duplicate the Star Wars intro, right? Like where you've got some, an asteroid going along, and then you get the and then the Sopwith flies
Followed
over
by
you.
behind, perhaps.
Followed by the Sopwith movie.
Looking forward to that as well.
And I've always been, since a kid, a little fan of planes, especially older planes, and so that's where the name came from. The Snoopy's plane.
Yep.
Sopwith Camel.
Nice. Of course, years later, when that game Red Baron came out, one of the first things I wanted to do was fly the Sopwith Camel because I knew about Snoopy and I knew about the game. I like what
I'm exactly the same. I'm exactly the same. Yeah, I love Red Baron. It's one of my favorites 90s DOS games. And I think the Sopwith part is definitely part of it.
Have any of the more current 3D versions of
that's what I was going to say. The Rise of Flight series is the one that I've been playing. And they have it now where you can even have head tracking. You use your phone and you move your head and the actual cockpit will change. It's incredible.
Yeah, I've been occasionally I get contacted to give these games a try and what do I think or whatever. But these games, it's so far out of my realm now that I can't really contribute anything other than I think people feel comfortable with the thumbs up. Go ahead.
Well, David, did you ever see that remake that one fan was able to do? It was in the App Store for a couple of years. It was called Sopwith Barons. And I thought it was actually a pretty good homage to the work that was done. It was a lot of fun. It was the same 2D and, same controls. Had like advanced AI for different, like Baron planes that would attack you and stuff. It's really cool.
My AI wasn't advanced. It wasn't.
Neither line of code, Dave.
Yeah. You remember the frustrations trying to make that work.
Well, it was always fun though watching when the enemy planes, sometimes they would just spontaneously, crater into stuff. That was part of the charm of it all.
Yeah.
Well, it was nice that Dave used real physics calculations, that things sort of fell at the proper speed, and that was a nice change from some early games. So.
But,
very complex physics engine involved in that one too. Yes, right. 3 more lines to go.
But Josh touched on something there, and it's just one of my favorite aspects of the game is that it's so chaotic, right? Like especially the later versions where you've got the debris going everywhere, and it's like watching just utter chaos a lot of the time, just things exploding, making other things explode. That's one of my favorite aspects of the game, is like the kind of comical aspect of it, that you have all these kind of things exploding everywhere, and
one of the early examples of particle physics.
Yes. And the splat bird, that was one that was trying to come up with the proper the proper pixels to represent that. What I'm curious about is that anybody who's played it here in this group is, what's your highest level? How high have you gone? And I think I know who the winner's going to be in this one.
Maybe it's a question for Dave.
Guys,
maybe Dave can tell us how high he's gone.
Well, I haven't played it in years and I've totally forgotten. Sorry.
I recall you made it to 6. I don't think I ever got it past 4. I think you got to 6.
Wait.
Crazy fast at that point.
Yeah.
Well, there was Sopwith 1 and there was Sopwith 2. And I think that it was written in Sopwith 1 because it would actually get faster. I don't know about 2 if that was just a repeat. I just remember playing it. Maybe I got to like level 3 and then I was like, okay, I've got to move on to something else.
At the levels, I mean, again, I'm recalling here, you know, the memory's not all that great, but it sped up. The guns they were more aggressive. You know, I think that was basically the two big things about it. Between 1 and 2, and one had the solid ground, and 2 had the ground that wasn't filled, and the only reason for that was performance.
Yeah.
Because back in the original days, it took so long to fill it around that I said, okay, no, we're just going to do this with erase a pixel, draw a pixel. That sped the game up to a point that it was playable.
But I just remember though when I would play that the Sopwith 2 that had the ground that was see-through, we always noticed that whenever you would bomb it, it would actually make
Yes.
you know that so we used to try and see, well, what would happen if we actually do enough of it so it goes all the way to the bottom, and then you go in from the bottom, what would that do?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly what it did, if it actually made it so that it was emulating when it came to the top or not. But
No, it just bottomed out. It just wouldn't go any lower.
Yeah.
And there is a very basic but silly reason as to why the crater had to be there. Because collision detection was not collision detection as we think of in a game now. Like there were no objects, you know, like, oh my gosh, I drew the plane on top of a ground pixel, therefore you had crashed. So it had there, or you
could fly through the hole.
You can fly
Cool.
through the hole and go on forever.
Neat.
Yeah.
I'd like that version.
you know, now I remember it was they had that same type of thing in the Sopwith Barons game, that app I was mentioning, and that was a little trick that you could do. You would bomb through the floor and you would actually fly through the floor, and that would unlock something in the game.
Oh, that's cool.
I wasn't knowing on the
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think we had any. We didn't have any little secrets like that in the game that I can recall putting into it. No, it was just just faster, fly faster, and that was it. And
Shooter.
and we introduced the flying off into the sunset. And that was it.
Who did the music? Was that also you, David? Just putting in the
Jack, did you help me with that? I'm trying to remember. The funny part is I've always dreamed of being a musician, and I can't play a note. But yeah, I do remember, pulling it up on the internet at the time, and pulling up the music and trying to get the frequency that you had to send to the speaker to get a note, and then I think if I recall correctly in the code, it's just a series of notes. But that was, and I, if I think of how Bill McLean and all of how much they paid me to get that to work, I don't think I want to know.
Was there a reason that you changed the tune between the earlier and later versions? I was always curious about that.
I'm looking at your vision here. I'm looking at your image here with a blank stare. I changed the tune.
Oh, sorry. Did you? You didn't hear the question?
I don't recall changing the tune.
Well, I remember that there were other versions of people who had taken the code and they messed with the music a little bit.
Oh, okay.
That happened.
Okay. No, I if it changed, I'm sorry. I just do not have any recollection of that.
So the first version seems to use. The first version seems to use "Merrily We Roll Along," which is famous from the. I think it's the Warner Brothers cartoons. To hear it, you have to give a special command line parameter, but it's yeah, and then
I didn't know.
And then
wow, you.
And then later on, it switched to
that one.
That one, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I do not ever. I do not recall programming that at all. It's always been the same tune in my mind.
Line in to get that. That's weird.
Interesting.
Huh.
I know there are a lot of
Oh.
modded versions out there, so maybe I've always been playing a modded version of Sopwith 1.
Well, here's a question that I have, and I haven't gone through my FAQ in a while, so I may have already answered this a while back. But so how was it that people who had this Imaginet were able to get a copy of Sopwith? Was it distributed with it? Was it just kind of there and they found it?
Yeah, that one. It was kind of there and they found it. It was part of the installation. It just wasn't marketed, so people would find it. And people would be in our office for a demonstration and they'd see it being run and then they'd ask for a copy, and of course that would spread. And so, yeah, it went all over the place pretty quickly.
Yeah, but it was written for the business game show, or the business shows, right? I mean, like,
Yep.
we wanted to have something that would demonstrate a network. Well,
So
you can demonstrate a network by somebody entering an invoice on this screen, and somebody does an accounts payable over on this screen, and you go, wow. Or you can you can have two people playing a game against each other.
So this was one of my
And actually seeing the planes and synchronized on everybody's screen.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you recall when this was demonstrated at business events? What did people think being able to see a multiplayer game at that time across computers?
Yeah,
Like that?
I'm very much drawing a blank on this one. Do you remember, guys, when we demoed it, or what show it was?
It probably would have been the Canadian Computer Show when it still existed in Toronto. It's been long gone. That would have been the most likely. We went to those in the US, but not very many.
Yeah.
We're at the Canadian Computer Show here.
We were considered the wild programmers. They also had tame ones that they would send to shows.
Very
As
true.
opposed to the ones who would, very brief answers. Yeah, you can do that. As opposed to an explanation of how to do it. So, yeah, we didn't get out much.
Yeah, there were, just to elaborate a touch, because we had the manager, which was this multi-user database that was Imaginet aware. We also had a team of people who wrote applications, and so we would get an order from somebody, and we'd put an Imaginet in, and then we'd use the manager to implement their custom application, complete with record locking and all this stuff that you need to do with a network of micros at the time. You could do with a mini computer, say a Digital Equipment Corporation. Ristus, if those words mean anything. You might put 8 users on one of those and everything worked, and that's what we were sort of emulating at the time.
Yeah, I think one of the things I discovered was that Sopwith really is one of the earliest kind of multiplayer games like this. There are some other examples that came a bit earlier, but it really is it was cutting edge in terms of gaming at the time.
Wow. Good job, Dave.
It wasn't even intended to be really a gaming thing. I mean, it was used to demonstrate your network, which makes it even more remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I believe it's mentioned somewhere, but we haven't mentioned it. The thing that Dave wrote was a mail package that ran on Imaginet as well. So in addition to this database system, we had a multi-user mail system that was what a lot of people bought the Imaginet for, right? So they could do mail inside the office and little things built into the network so that you got notified when you got mail, and it would play a little tune and things like that. So a lot of little gadgets that we didn't have anything to copy from except the mini computer and mainframe world. So we tried to implement things. Dave's background was IBM minis. Mine was DEC minis. And so we had lots of experience in those areas. But these new IBM PC things, they were crazy. I remember when I showed up at B&B, that was the first time I'd ever seen one. And it was I believe, a version of IBM PC because the XT hadn't come out yet. And so we started developing on those. Nothing like developing on floppies, I tell you.
No hard drive.
Well, we used to send once we got hard drives, because we used to have tall grass hard drives.
That's right.
And yeah, the ads we used to make such fun of.
Lose your data in the tall grass. Yes.
Yes. But it got to the point where we'd send all our we had a really powerful server. It was still an IBM, and the most advanced we could get at the time. Send everything up to the server to be compiled, because if you did it on our transports, you go for a cup of coffee, have lunch, come back, and almost have it
In
finished.
general.
Yeah, well, a big thank you to you, Josh, for keeping this all alive. The way you have.
All right, everybody visit sopwith.org. Still running after 20 plus years. All right.
Take
Bye,
care.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
So I have a couple more questions. We talked a bit about the inspirations for Sopwith. I know there are some arcade games at the time that have some similarities. Were there any inspirations there that inspired you when you were designing the game?
Not really. Again, I never was, and I'm not a gamer. So I get that there was obviously, the thought of a side-to-side scrolling game, and there were some around it. So I think I guess I would say that's the limit of the inspiration is that's all we had to work with as a side-to-side scroller. So that's what he did. But beyond that, no.
Okay. Yeah, I have a list on my website of kind of Sopwith inspired games and Sopwith maybe inspired games, because it's hard to tell how many times the concept has been kind of reinvented, and how many times I played this game when I was young, and I want to do homage to it. So there's certainly a lot out there, but it's hard to tell how many of them. Is there any particular feature that you wish Sopwith had, or that you'd added to it when you were developing it?
I don't know. There are some features I wish I hadn't added. I mean, I think we got into this. We got to make it fancier some way, so it had the missiles and the flares and the like. Which after the fact, I go, oh, come on, that was a bit silly. But the whole game was silly. But I don't know. I mean, we were trying to get as much as we could out of a small machine, limited memory, and such. So I think I get always dreamed of making it bigger, making the terrain larger. Maybe you could get over. Maybe you could blow out the top of the mountain and go over on the other side of the mountain, and there'd be another world there. But there wasn't the memory to work with. Like we pretty well maxed it out.
Okay. But you didn't want to program overlays, Dave? Term you might not know, Simon. I don't know, but
What's the
overlays. So lots of times when you're trying to work in these small memory configurations, you'd actually write your code so that it would swap out a big chunk of the code and bring in another chunk when you wanted to change functions.
Right.
So what a pain! What a pain in the neck.
Yeah, and some of
the overlay linker. I remember.
Yep.
And I know that as the memory got bigger, they came up with all kinds of things like, was it XMS and EMS? I forget which one is which.
Extended and expanded.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you could do bank switching, and I think Bill Gates said something along the lines of, "It's a terrible hack, but we're going to do it."
Yeah, very true.
They didn't have a
Imaginet
choice.
would use however much memory was on your machine as cache, as disk cache. So we got to explore extended memory and expanded memory and regular memory, and all these. You're right, terrible hacks, but fun to do when they worked. So
Very satisfying when they work. I know that feeling.
Yeah, I don't really recall why we insisted on limiting it to the 64K or actually 46K. I can't remember these
Small
newer
memory.
machines had more memory, so I mean that
small memory model, Dave.
Small memory model. Yeah.
It was probably small memory model,
Yeah,
right, for performance
should-
reasons.
yeah.
That was a 64K. Same
Yeah.
code segment, data segment, extra segment, and stack segment.
Yeah, oh yes, yep.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
It wouldn't have been a great leap to go. I don't know. I'm trying to remember the timing of this all, right? Like, I mean, we all eventually did drift off, so it was probably at that time that it just sort of, the interest in it dwindled. But we could have taken it further.
So I have a couple of questions from people from the Discord server. We have a Discord server where we can chat about Sopwith and so on. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. It's fairly recent development, but I have a couple of questions that people wanted to ask. So this first one comes from NY00123. What may we further learn about you? And I know, David, that you have your interest in astronomy, so maybe you can talk about that a bit. I'd be interested to hear.
Okay, so sorry, the actual question was what?
What may we further learn about you?
What? Oh, well, okay. Well, I mean, yes, I just gone on and primarily as a contract programmer working in a variety of areas, the health industry, medical health industry, and distribution, manufacturing. And a while ago, I did a few animations for the meteor physics group here in London, Western University, and took an interest and approached them and said, could I have do you think I could do a bachelor's in science? Because it looked interesting, and they convinced me to do a master's and completed my PhD about 2 months ago. So that's sort of been, my life has shifted that way towards astronomical research. But as I tell them, the rest of the department, they're primarily scientists who code, and I'm a coder who finds science and astronomy a wonderful application for coding.
One of the other programs Dave wrote was ClearSky, or as some people call it, ClearSky. And basically would describe it better than I can, but yeah, it was fun to watch even back then.
Yeah. It's a 3D animation program that I wrote originally for demonstrating astronomical concepts in schools and such. As an amateur astronomer, I would do astronomical presentations in class, take over a class for an afternoon, and just talk about the solar system and the like. And I just found that 3D animations were just a wonderful way of demonstrating concepts. They often say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, an animation is worth 1,000 pictures, and that's really where ClearSky came out of. And then it's just it's actually morphed into the base piece of software that I've used for my astronomical research and presentation work and the like.
And so I have another question here from Tech Knight. What do you think of your legacy? I know. It seems like just a funny question to ask because I'm sure looking back on your life, Sopwith seems like such a small thing compared to everything you've done since.
No, I think that's an interesting question. I've recently spoke to folks about what is immortality, and immortality is the best you can do is make sure your name is out there in places, right? No, definitely Sopwith is the thing that's, it's my 5 minutes of fame. That's what it is. I don't really think about it, as how long it will stay out there. And it's something I'm proud of, I guess, to say it, but it's more a fun surprise because it went for so long out there. I was totally unaware of it.
Yeah.
That was the best part of it. It's just realizing it was still out there, and that it actually meant something to people.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think that's all of the questions that I had. Do you have any other stories that you'd like to bring up from the BMB days? Is there anything we've missed that we should really know about?
The biggest one of the biggest B&B memories I have is how Dave used to slaughter me on the squash court. That's they were fun times. I mean, if I look back at all of the places that I worked, and there've been many great places, and if anybody is watching this, I hope they're not offended by me saying this, but B&B was the most fun. It was a good time, and it was a time where you had an idea and you could do it. You could move on it, right? There just wasn't a whole lot of questioning around it. It's just, yeah, go do it. And that was an amazingly free time.
I've had that impression it was a fairly small company. I think you gave a number earlier. Was it like 20 people or something? But
over to Jack.
It was probably the R&D group was probably about 15 to 18 people, and then there were another 20 in the building, and then there were the various retail outlets across Ontario. So it might have got up to 50, but the core group was certainly less than 20. And a lot of them our age, which was young then, not so much now. And as Dave said, we were given a lot of freedom. We were basically, if we found something we wanted to work on, we worked on it. And Sopwith is a good example. Imaginet was a good example. I was said, here's our hardware design. The hardware was actually designed by a couple of engineers outside of the company. So they deliver the hardware and come up with some software, and we invented it from scratch. Probably true of the other things that were done. Dave's mail package, probably sort of invented from scratch. So, that doesn't happen anymore. These days it's specifications up the wazoo. Yes. But yeah, everybody says, yeah, specs up the wazoo. We didn't have no stinking specs. I mean, we were just
sure they did, but it was one line.
Yeah, write a demo.
That was it.
Yeah. So it was kind of Wild West-like, but we did have a lot of fun producing stuff, and we produced things that I'm proud of. And I was thinking when you're asking Dave about his legacy, here it is. I've worked in software R&D my whole career. Nothing that I developed has survived. I've worked on lots of really cool projects, but none of them exist anymore. But Sopwith is going to be around for another 40 years. And so is ClearSky, I'm sure, Dave. So Dave has a legacy, and I only wish I could have one. Maybe this interview, who knows?
Jack's legacy is in the music industry. A phenomenally hard worker there, and that's
yeah, but nobody will remember that in 40 years either.
I think.
I'm curious to hear more about that. So you've been working in music.
I run a concert series in the city that we live in, and that's bloomed into a few other spin-offs, song circles and songbooks and the like. So I'm fairly well known, at least in this part of Ontario, for the musical side of things. If I were to move the camera around, you'd find a dozen instruments in the room I'm in right now too. But.
Well, I can already see what looks like an entire wall of CDs in the background there. But...
Yeah, and that's about a third of the collection. So yeah,
I think
went
Jack's
that
being
route.
A bit humble here. He's I think any folk musician in Canada knows Jack. Is sort of my impression.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. If not,
And
they
a few
should.
in the UK.
Few in the UK and the US. So yeah, we've been fortunate to make all that work. But I would trade a lot of that for a Sopwith in my legacy, because it's just, I mean, wow, all the thousands, millions of hours of entertainment that game has provided people, and frustration, but mostly entertainment. It's pretty wonderful. So.
Yeah, think of the lost productivity, though. That's
Yeah.
the net benefit mankind.
No,
negative.
It's a reset. It's a reset.
I'm just imagining all those librarians at the Vatican, wasting time.
That's right. Yeah. Imagine when they got caught playing Sopwith instead of doing what they're supposed to be doing. It must have been a bad thing. And unfortunately, I never got to go on that installation. Too bad, eh?
Yeah. There was a quote. I can't remember if it was a quote or maybe an XKCD comic. I've tried to find where it was, and I can't remember where I saw it, but it was something along the lines of, if you want your software to live forever, like, write a game, because people will go, office software and applications and so on, it'll be forgotten and become obsolete, but people will go to any ridiculous lengths to preserve the game that they used to play as a kid, those old games. Like they will move heaven and earth to be able to keep those games running. And I think this is a really good example.
Absolutely. Where was that advice when I was starting out, eh? Write a game. Nobody told me that.
Well, for my whole life and my career, I've been lucky. I think that was it wasn't a choice that was made of, this is going to be successful, this is going to be wow. It just seemed to be the right thing to do at the time.
Do you remember Giotto, Dave?
Uh-oh.
The game that Fred, our roommate, wrote. So this was when we were in university, Simon. Our roommate Fred wrote a little text-based game called Giotto, which is basically Wordle. And that was in the 70s.
Yes, yes.
And before Sopwith came along, that was what I wasted my time playing Giotto. So it's too bad he didn't actually publish that.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's another story along that line was when I was working at IBM before B&B, there was a little system called an IBM 5100. It had tape drives and one of our clients wanted the ability to write some flexible reports, and I came up with this crazy idea that it was actually this rectangle of cells that you could put numbers in, and you would actually write the formulas in the bottom. and I never took it. I never jumped to the idea that you could put a formula in a cell, right? But I put the totals down at the bottom, and I'm sitting there. And I look at that 20 years later. That was a spreadsheet, right? Long before spreadsheets were around. You go, another one missed.
Think of the legacy, Dave. Think of the legacy.
Yeah, but a spreadsheet, I'm not sure it would have flown so well. I mean, look at VisiCalc. It was the first, and it died pretty quick.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly wouldn't have flown as well as Sopwith did. So.
Nice point.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank David Clark, Dave Growden, Jack Cole and Josh Horowitz for taking the time to chat with me about Sopwith. Check the video description for a link to the 40th anniversary site, where you can find some information on the game's history, pick up some 40th anniversary merchandise, and most importantly, play the game in your browser. Thanks for watching.